Hey everyone, I'm Patricia, and I'm 68 years old. What I'm about to tell you might sound unbelievable, but every word is true. And honestly, I still can't believe how it all turned out. But before I dive into this crazy story, let me paint you a picture of who I was and who I became. I was married to my husband James for 32 beautiful years. We had one daughter together, my precious girl, or at least she used to be. Her name is Rebecca, and she's 45 now. For the longest time, she was my entire world. James and I, we poured everything we had into that girl. Every sacrifice, every penny, every sleepless night. You know how some parents talk about their kids being their pride and joy? Well, Rebecca was ours. She was brilliant, straight A's, full scholarship to college, the whole 9 yards. We were so proud. I worked double shifts at the diner just to make sure she had everything she needed. Designer clothes, the latest gadgets, spring break trips with her friends, whatever she wanted. James used to joke that we spoiled her rotten, but we thought we were just being good parents. We wanted to give her the world because we came from nothing. Both of us grew up poor, and we swore our daughter would never know what that felt like. And for a while it seemed like our plan worked perfectly. Rebecca graduated summa cum laude, got a great job in marketing, married a successful lawyer named Christopher, and gave us the most beautiful grandson you've ever seen, little Austin. God, I loved that boy from the moment I laid eyes on him. He had these bright green eyes, just like his mama did when she was little. Everything seemed perfect. We were the picture-perfect family, or so I thought. But here's the thing about life. It has a way of showing you just how quickly everything can fall apart. James started getting sick when Rebecca was about 24. At first we thought it was just stress from work. He was a construction foreman, and the job was getting harder on his body. But then the headaches started getting worse. The fatigue became overwhelming. I'll never forget the day we got the diagnosis. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. The doctor said he had maybe 6 months if we were lucky. We weren't lucky. James fought for 8 months, and let me tell you, those were the hardest 8 months of my life. Watching the love of your life waste away while you're powerless to stop it. It changes you. It breaks something inside you that never quite heals the same way. During those 8 months, Rebecca visited maybe 3 times. 3 times. Her father was dying, and she couldn't be bothered to drive the 2 hours from the city to see him. She always had excuses. Work was busy. Austin had a school play. Christopher had some important client dinner. I made excuse after excuse for her because she was my daughter and I couldn't accept that she just didn't care enough to be there. The night James died, I called Rebecca sobbing. You know what she said? "Mom, I'm so sorry, but I can't make it to the funeral. Austin has this soccer tournament and we already paid the registration fee." A registration fee. That's what was more important than her father's funeral. But wait, it gets worse. So much worse. After James passed, I fell apart. And I mean completely apart. The grief was suffocating. I stopped eating properly, stopped taking care of myself, stopped caring about anything really. My world had revolved around taking care of James, and suddenly, he was gone. About 6 months after the funeral, I started getting these weird symptoms. Extreme fatigue, joint pain, random fevers. At first I thought it was just grief manifesting physically. You know how they say stress can make you sick? But when I started losing weight rapidly and couldn't keep food down, I knew something was seriously wrong. The diagnosis hit me like a truck. Lupus. And not just any lupus. A particularly aggressive form that was attacking multiple organs. The doctor explained it in terms I could barely understand, but the bottom line was clear. I was going to need a lot of help, a lot of medical care, and a lot of support. I called Rebecca that same day, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. "Rebecca, honey, I need to tell you something important. I just got back from the doctor and—" "Mom, can this wait? I'm literally walking into a meeting." Sweetheart, I have lupus. It's serious and I'm going to need help with lupus, like the thing Selena Gomez has. Mom, people live normal lives with that. Look, I really have to go. We'll talk later, okay? She hung up. We didn't talk later. In fact, we didn't talk for weeks. The next few months were a blur of doctor appointments, treatments that made me sicker than the disease itself, and a loneliness so deep I sometimes wondered if it would have been easier to just give up. My neighbors, bless their hearts, tried to help where they could. Mrs. Chen from next door would bring me soup sometimes. The Peterson family would shovel my driveway in winter. But it wasn't the same as having family, having your own child, care about whether you lived or died. I called Rebecca maybe once a week for the first few months. Sometimes she'd answer, sometimes she wouldn't. When she did answer, our conversations were always the same. How are you feeling, Mom? How are you feeling? Not great, honey. The treatments are really rough, and I could really use some help with... That's too bad. Hey, I've got to run. Austin has practice. Click. It was like talking to a stranger, a polite stranger who couldn't be bothered to invest more than 30 seconds in the conversation. But you know what the worst part was? Hope. I kept hoping she'd surprise me. I kept thinking that surely, when things got really bad, she'd step up. She'd remember that I was her mother, that I'd spent my entire adult life putting her first. Boy, was I wrong. Things did get really bad. About a year and a half after my diagnosis, I had what my doctor called a flare-up from hell. My kidneys started failing. My joints swelled so badly I couldn't open a jar or even hold a pen properly, and I developed these awful sores in my mouth that made eating agony. I ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks. 3 weeks, I called Rebecca from my hospital bed that first day, barely able to speak through the pain medication haze. Rebecca, I'm in the hospital. It's bad this time, really bad. Could you maybe come see me? Silence. Then, what hospital? I told her. For a moment, I thought she was going to say she was on her way. My heart actually lifted. Mom, that's like 4 hours round trip, and I've got Austin's parent-teacher conferences this week. Plus, Christopher's mother is visiting. Can't you call one of your neighbors or something? Or something. Like I was asking her to water my plants, not be there for her dying mother. I spent those 3 weeks alone, except for the nurses and the occasional visit from Mrs. Chen, who was about 80 herself, and probably shouldn't have been driving to the hospital in the first place. But wait, remember when I said this story gets unbelievable? We're just getting started. When I got out of the hospital, I was different, not just physically, though the disease had definitely taken its toll, but mentally, emotionally, something inside me had shifted during those long, lonely nights in that sterile room. I stopped calling Rebecca. At first I thought maybe she'd notice. Maybe she'd wonder why her sick mother suddenly wasn't reaching out anymore. Maybe she'd call to check on me. She didn't. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And slowly, I started to rebuild my life. Not the life I'd had with James, and not the life I'd imagined having with a daughter who cared about me, but a new life. A life that was just mine. I found a support group for people with chronic illnesses. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter when I was feeling well enough. I took up painting, something I'd always wanted to try, but never had time for when I was busy taking care of everyone else. And you know what? I discovered something amazing. I actually liked who I was when I wasn't constantly trying to earn someone else's love and attention. Don't get me wrong, the grief was always there. Grief for James, grief for the daughter I thought I had, grief for the relationship I'd always dreamed we'd have. But alongside that grief, something else grew. Strength. I learned to ask my neighbors for help when I needed it, and I learned to help them in return when I was able. I built real friendships, the kind where people check on you because they genuinely care, not because they feel obligated. Mrs. Chen and I became particularly close. She'd lost her husband around the same time I lost James, and we understood each other's loneliness. We started having dinner together twice a week, and she taught me how to make the most incredible dumplings. The Petersons, David and Maria, were like the son and daughter-in-law I'd never had. When I had a bad flare-up, Maria would come over with groceries and actually stay to make sure I ate something. When David noticed my porch railing was getting wobbly, he fixed it without being asked. These people weren't my blood relatives, but they became my family in every way that mattered. Years passed. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I had good days and bad days with my health, but overall, I was managing. The doctors had found a treatment combination that kept my symptoms more or less under control, and I'd learned to pace myself and listen to my body. I celebrated birthdays with my chosen family. I traveled a little bit, nothing fancy, just day trips to nearby towns or overnight stays at bed and breakfasts. I painted dozens of terrible paintings that made me incredibly happy. And slowly, the sharp edges of my anger toward Rebecca softened into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Acceptance that she was who she was, and I couldn't change that. Acceptance that I deserved better than spending my energy on someone who couldn't be bothered to return it. I stopped, wondering what Austin looked like now, or whether he ever asked about his grandmother. I stopped imagining what it would be like if Rebecca showed up at my door with an apology. I stopped hoping for a relationship that was never going to exist. I thought I had found peace with it all, but life had other plans. It was a Tuesday, morning in March. I remember because I'd just finished painting this gorgeous sunset scene and was cleaning my brushes when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer it because I didn't recognize the number. Thank God I did. And also, God help me, because what happened next turned my quiet, peaceful world completely upside down. Hello? Mom? The voice was older, raspier than I remembered, but unmistakably hers. Rebecca. After 20 years of silence, my daughter was calling me, and she was crying. Mom, I need help, please. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've been awful, but I don't know who else to call. My first instinct, and I'm not proud of this, was to hang up. 20 years of nothing, and now she needed something? The timing wasn't exactly subtle, but that voice. God, she sounded so broken. What's wrong? I heard myself asking, even though part of me was screaming to just hang up and go back to my painting. It's Austin. Mom, he's in serious trouble. Life-changing, future-destroying trouble, and I don't know what to do. Austin, my grandson who was now, 25? 26? I'd missed his entire childhood, his graduation, probably his first job, maybe even a wedding. What kind of trouble? The sob that came through the phone was unlike anything I'd ever heard from Rebecca. In all the years I'd known her, as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, I'd never heard her sound so completely defeated. He's been arrested. They're saying he embezzled money from his company. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, Mom. His bail is set at $500,000, and if he's convicted, he's looking at 10 to 15 years in prison. I sat down hard in my kitchen chair, my mind reeling. Rebecca, I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't understand why you're calling me. We haven't spoken in 20 years, because I need $50,000 for his bail. The bail bondsman needs 10%, and Mom, I don't have it. Christopher and we got divorced 5 years ago. Bad divorce. He kept most of everything, and I've been struggling ever since. My credit is short, I can't get a loan, and Austin is sitting in jail right now because I can't help my own son. $50,000. She wanted $50,000 from the mother she'd abandoned during the worst period of her life. Rebecca, I said slowly, I'm 68 years old. I've been living on Social Security and a small pension for years. Where exactly do you think I would get $50,000? I know about the house, Mom. I know it's paid off. and property values in your neighborhood have gone through the roof. You could get a home equity loan or maybe even sell it. Please, I'm begging you. Austin is a good kid. He just made some terrible mistakes. He doesn't deserve to have his life ruined over this. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to risk my home, the home I'd shared with her father, the home that was my security in my old age, for a grandson I hadn't seen in 20 years, and a daughter who hadn't bothered to check if I was alive or dead for 2 decades. But here's where the story gets really interesting, because what Rebecca didn't know, what she couldn't have known since she'd never once in 20 years asked about my life, was that her abandoned, sick, supposedly poor mother had done quite well for herself. You see, when James died, he left me a life insurance policy, not a huge one, but decent. Instead of spending it, I had invested it conservatively. Over 20 years, with careful management and the advice of a financial planner I'd started seeing, that modest sum had grown considerably. Then there was the inheritance from my Aunt Rosemary, James's sister, who'd passed away about 10 years ago. She'd never had children and had left me a substantial amount. Money that Rebecca never knew existed because she'd never bothered to attend the funeral or ask about my life. And yes, Rebecca was right about the house. What had been a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood had somehow become prime real estate. The value had more than tripled since James and I had bought it 30 years ago. So when my daughter called asking for $50,000 from her poor, sick mother, I actually had closer to $800,000 in various investments and assets. I could have helped her. Financially, it wouldn't have even been that difficult. But here's the thing that Rebecca never understood, even after all these years. This was never about money. Rebecca, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Let me ask you something. In the last 20 years, how many times have you called to check on me? Silence. How many times have you visited? More silence. Do you know if I'm still sick? Do you know if I've been in the hospital? Do you even know if I'm still living in the same house? Mom, this isn't the time for... Actually, Rebecca, this is exactly the time. You see, I've had 20 years to think about our relationship. 20 years to wonder what I did wrong, why my only child could disappear from my life so completely. And I finally figured it out. Mom, please, Austin needs... I'm not finished. Something in my voice must have stopped her because she went quiet. I realized that I raised you to believe that love is something you only give when it's convenient for you. That family is something you only remember when you need something. That other people, even your own mother, only exist to serve your needs. I could hear her crying, but I wasn't done. You know what the saddest part is? I would have helped you. If you had called me 5 years ago when you were getting divorced, if you had reached out when you were struggling, if you had ever, even once, picked up the phone just to see how I was doing, I would have moved heaven and earth to help you. I can still do that. Mom, I promise. After this is over, we can work on our relationship. We can... No, Rebecca, we can't. And that's when I said the words that I'd been building up to for 20 years. Words that felt both terrible and liberating at the same time. I'm not going to help you. Not with money, not with bail, not with anything. You made your choice 20 years ago when you decided I wasn't worth your time. Now I'm making mine. The sound that came through the phone was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Part sob, part wail, part disbelief. But you're my mother. Yes, I am, and you're my daughter. And for 20 years, you forgot that meant anything at all. But, guys, this is only the beginning of this crazy story. What happened next, the things I discovered about Austin's situation, the truth about Rebecca's marriage, and the choice I ultimately made, it's going to blow your minds. Because sometimes, life has a way of showing you that people aren't always who you think they are. And sometimes that includes yourself. Mom, please. You don't understand. He's innocent. Austin didn't do this. I almost laughed. Of course he was innocent. In Rebecca's world, her precious son could never do anything wrong, just like she'd never, done anything wrong by abandoning her dying mother. Rebecca, I've heard enough. Don't call this number again. Wait, Mom, wait! There's something you need to know about Austin, about why this happened. Something in her voice made me pause. It wasn't just desperation anymore, there was something else. Fear? Shame? What are you talking about? He was trying to help me. The money he took, it wasn't for him. It was for me. Now she had my attention. Go on. After Christopher and I divorced, things got bad. Really bad. I wasn't just struggling financially, I was drowning. The divorce settlement wasn't what I expected, and I made some terrible decisions. I got involved with some people I shouldn't have. What kind of people, Rebecca? The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Gambling, Mom. I developed a gambling problem. Online poker, sports betting, casino trips. It started small when Christopher and I were having problems. Just something to escape, you know? But it got out of control so fast. My heart sank. James's father had been a gambler. I'd seen what that disease could do to a family. How much do you owe? $200,000. Jesus, to who? Some of it's to legitimate places, casinos, online sites, but most of it, Mom, most of it's to people who don't exactly send collection letters. They send other kinds of messages. Now I understood the fear in her voice. You mean loan sharks? I tried to handle it myself. I sold everything I could, worked extra jobs, but the interest just kept building. And then they started making threats. Not just against me, against Austin too. They said if I didn't pay up, they'd make sure he couldn't get work anywhere, couldn't have a future. So Austin stole money to pay your gambling debts? He didn't know it was gambling. I told him I had medical bills, that I was sick and couldn't afford treatment. I let him think. I was dying, Mom. The irony was so bitter it almost choked me. Rebecca had let her son believe she was dying to manipulate him into destroying his own life, while her actually dying mother had been ignored for 20 years. He took the money from his company to save what he thought was my life, and now he's facing prison because I was too ashamed to tell him the truth. I sat there holding the phone, trying to process everything I'd just heard. Part of me felt vindicated. This was exactly the kind of chaos I'd expected Rebecca's life to become. But another part of me, the part that remembered teaching a 6-year-old Rebecca how to ride a bike and comforting her after nightmares, felt something I didn't want to acknowledge. Rebecca, even if all of this is true, it doesn't change anything. You made your choices. Austin made his. I can't fix this for you. But you could, Mom, you could. If I just what? Risk my home and my security for people who've treated me like I don't exist? You think because you finally hit rock bottom I should come running to save you? We're family. No, Rebecca. Family shows up. Family calls to check on each other. Family doesn't disappear for 20 years and then reappear when they need money. But even as I said the words, something was nagging at me. Maybe it was the thought of a 26-year-old kid sitting in jail for trying to save his mother's life. Maybe it was the image of loan sharks threatening my grandson, a grandson I'd never met, but who shared my blood. Or maybe it was just that after 20 years of anger, I was tired. Mom, I know I don't deserve your help. I know I've been the worst daughter in the world, but Austin doesn't deserve this. He's a good kid who made one terrible mistake because he loves his mother too much. Damn her. Damn her for knowing exactly what to say. Where are you now, Rebecca? What? Where are you? What city? I'm still in Chicago. Same apartment I've had for the last 8 years. Chicago. 2 hours away. The same distance it had been when her father was dying, when I was in the hospital alone, when I needed her most. Give me the address. Mom, what? The address, Rebecca, and Austin's bail information, everything. Does this mean, are you going to help us? I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not making any decisions over the phone. If you want my help, we're going to do this face to face. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 20 years. I drove to Chicago. Let me tell you, that 2-hour drive felt like the longest and shortest trip of my life. Part of me kept wanting to turn around and go home to my peaceful little world. But another part of me, the part that had spent 2 decades wondering what if, needed to see this through. Rebecca's apartment was in one of those complexes that looked nice from a distance, but showed its wear up close. Paint peeling around the windows, landscaping that had seen better days, the kind of place where people lived when they were trying to maintain appearances on a tight budget. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could bring myself to knock on her door. When it opened, I barely recognized the woman standing there. The Rebecca I remembered had been put together, polished, always dressed like she was heading to an important meeting. This woman looked exhausted, thin in a way that spoke of stress rather than health. Her hair was streaked with gray she hadn't bothered to cover, and she was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt that had seen better days. But her eyes were the same green as Austin's, the same green they'd been when she was 5 years old and would crawl into my lap for bedtime stories. Mom. Her voice broke on the word. Rebecca. We stood there staring at each other for what felt like forever. 20 years of hurt and anger and longing hanging in the air between us. You came, she whispered. I came. She stepped aside to let me in, and I got my first look at how my daughter had been living. The apartment was small but clean, furnished with pieces that looked like they'd come from garage sales and second-hand stores. There were photos on the side table, Austin at various ages, looking so much like Rebecca had as a child, it took my breath away. Coffee? She asked, and I nodded. We sat at her tiny kitchen table, both of us holding our mugs like shields, neither of us knowing how to begin. You look good, Mom, she finally said. Healthier than I expected. What did you expect? She had the grace to look ashamed. I don't know. I guess I told myself you were probably fine, that you didn't really need me. It was easier than admitting I was too selfish to find out. At least she was being honest. Tell me about Austin, I said. Everything, from the beginning. And she did. She told me about the brilliant little boy who'd grown up too fast after his parents' messy divorce, about how he'd worked 2 jobs to put himself through college because Christopher had cut off financial support, about the entry-level position at a financial firm that he'd been so proud of, and how hard he'd worked to prove himself. He's nothing like me, Mom. He's responsible, caring, honest to a fault. When I told him I was sick and needed money for treatment, he didn't hesitate. He said he'd figure out a way to help me no matter what. How exactly did he take the money? Rebecca's face crumpled. He had access to client accounts for transfers and transactions. He moved money from several large accounts into a temporary holding account, planning to move it right back after he paid my debts. But there was an audit before he could replace it. How much are we talking about? $350,000 total. He was going to pay my debts and put the rest back, but he got caught first. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. The worst part is, the loan sharks, they still want their money. They don't care that Austin's in jail. They don't care that he sacrificed everything for me. They want $200,000, or they're going to make sure he doesn't survive his prison sentence. Ice ran through my veins. They threatened to have him killed in prison. Not directly, but they made it clear that they have connections everywhere, and if I don't pay up, Austin will have a very difficult time behind bars. I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything. My grandson, a boy I'd never met, but who was clearly nothing like his mother when it came to selfishness, was facing prison and possibly death because he'd tried to save the woman who'd raised him to believe that love meant sacrifice. I want to see him, I heard myself say. What? Austin. I want to see him before I make any decisions. Rebecca's face lit up with the first real hope I'd seen since I'd arrived. Yes, yes, of course. Visiting hours are this afternoon. Mom, thank you. Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided anything. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The moment she'd told me about the threats against Austin's life, the decision had been made. Not because I'd forgiven Rebecca. I wasn't sure I ever could. Not because I thought what Austin had done was right, but because no mother should have to bury her child, and no grandmother should let her grandson die for love. The county jail was exactly as depressing as you'd imagine. Gray walls, fluorescent lighting, the smell of disinfectant trying to cover less pleasant odors. Rebecca and I sat across from each other in the visitor's room, waiting. When they brought Austin in, my heart nearly stopped. He was tall, probably by 6'2", with Rebecca's green eyes, and what I could see was James's jawline under a scruffy beard. But it was his expression that got to me. Not the hardened look you might expect from someone facing serious jail time, but something lost and confused and utterly heartbroken. His eyes widened when he saw me sitting next to Rebecca. "Mom, who?" "Austin," Rebecca said softly. "This is your grandmother, my mother." The look that crossed his face was complicated. Surprise, confusion, and something that might have been recognition. "Grandma Patricia?" My throat tightened. He knew my name. You remember me?" "I remember pictures. And Mom used to tell me stories about you when I was little before." He trailed off, but I knew what he meant, before Rebecca had decided I didn't exist. "Austin," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "your mother told me what happened. Why you did what you did." His shoulders sagged. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. I know what I did was wrong. I know there's no excuse for stealing, but Mom was dying, and I couldn't just let her." "She wasn't dying, Austin." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they needed to be said. His face went blank. "What?" I looked at Rebecca, who had gone pale. "Tell him." "Mom, please, not now." "Tell him, Rebecca. Tell him why he's really here." Austin looked between us, confusion and growing dread on his face. "Mom, what is she talking about?" Rebecca was crying again, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd had months to tell her son the truth. I wasn't sick, Austin. I had gambling debts, a lot of them, to dangerous people, and I was scared, and I didn't know what to do. So I told you I had cancer and needed money for treatment. The silence that followed was deafening. Austin stared at his mother like he'd never seen her before. "You told me you were dying." "I know, baby, I know it was wrong, but you told me you were dying." His voice was getting louder, drawing looks from the guards. "I destroyed my life, my career, my future because I thought my mother was dying." "Of cancer? And you are gambling?" "Austin, please, keep your voice down." He turned to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Did you know? When she called you, did you know?" "I found out yesterday, the same time you're finding out now." He put his head in his hands. Oh God, what have I done? My life is over because of a lie." "No," I said firmly. "Your life is over because you made a choice to steal money. It was the wrong choice, even if you made it for the right reasons." He looked up at me, startled, but I continued. "It doesn't have to stay over." Rebecca and Austin both stared at me. "I'm going to pay your bail, Austin, and I'm going to hire you the best criminal defense attorney I can find." "Mom," Rebecca gasped. "But," I said, holding up a hand, "there are conditions, non-negotiable conditions." Austin nodded eagerly. Anything at all. "First, you're going to come stay with me while this legal mess gets sorted out. You're going to get a job, any job, and you're going to start paying back every penny you stole, even if it takes the rest of your life." "Yes, ma'am." "Second, you're going to attend Gamblers Anonymous meetings with your mother, because even though you didn't gamble, you need to understand what drove her to destroy both your lives. Rebecca started to protest, but I cut her off with a look. Third, and this is the big one, your mother is going to check herself into a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. A real one, not some weekend seminar. And she's going to stay there for as long as it takes. Mom, I can't afford. I'll pay for that too. But Rebecca, understand this. This is not me forgiving you. This is not us having a relationship again. This is me making sure my grandson has a chance at a decent life and that you get the help you clearly need. Austin was crying now. Big, silent tears that broke my heart. Why? He asked. Why would you help us when she... I looked at this young man who'd sacrificed everything for what he thought was love, and I saw something I recognized, something I'd been once upon. A time, because I said, somebody should have taught your mother a long time ago that love isn't supposed to destroy the people you care about. And maybe, if you learn that lesson now, you won't make the same mistakes she did. I stood up. I'll have the bail money ready by tomorrow morning. Austin, you'll be out by tomorrow afternoon. Grandma Patricia? Austin's voice was small, uncertain. Yes. Thank you. And I'm sorry. For all of it. For what she did to you, for what I did to myself, for everything. I looked at him for a long moment. This stranger who was my blood. This young man who'd made a terrible choice for what he thought were the right reasons. Austin, we all make mistakes. The measure of a person isn't whether they fall down. It's whether they get back up and do better. As we left the jail, Rebecca grabbed my arm. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. Don't. I pulled away from her touch. This isn't about you, Rebecca. This is about Austin, and it's about me choosing to be the kind of person I want to be, regardless of how others have treated me. But maybe this could be a fresh start for us. Maybe we could... No. The word came out flat and final. You're going to get help, and I'm going to make sure Austin has a chance to rebuild his life. But you and I? We're done. 20 years too late, but we're done. The look of hope dying in her eyes almost made me reconsider. Almost. But I'd learned something important over the past 20 years. You can't love someone into being a better person. You can't sacrifice yourself into earning someone's respect, and you can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The next morning, I walked into the bail bondsman's office with a cashier's check for $50,000. By that afternoon, Austin was free. He came home with me that day, carrying everything he owned in a single duffel bag. The apartment he'd been so proud of was gone. Lost when he couldn't make rent from jail. The car sold to try to make restitution. His job obviously gone, but you know what? As we sat at my kitchen table that first night, sharing the dumplings Mrs. Chen had brought over when she heard I had company, Austin smiled for the first time since I'd met him. These are incredible, he said, and Mrs. Chen beamed. Old family. Recipe, she said. Patricia, he has good manners. You keep this one. After she left, Austin looked around my little house, at my terrible paintings on the walls, at the photos of the life I'd built without his mother, at the comfortable chaos of a woman who'd learned to live for herself. It's nice here, he said, quietly. Peaceful. It is now. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Austin knocked on my bedroom door. Grandma Patricia, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really help me? And don't say it was just about doing the right thing. I need to understand. I thought about it for a long moment. Because, I said finally, I spent 20 years angry at your mother for abandoning me when I needed her most. And I realized that if I abandoned you when you needed help most, I'd be no better than she was. But she deserved to be abandoned. I deserved to face the consequences of what I did. Maybe. But Austin, consequences and punishment aren't the same thing. You're going to face consequences for what you did. Legal consequences, financial consequences, career consequences. But that doesn't mean you deserve to face them alone. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd left. I'm going to make this right, he said finally. However long it takes, whatever I have to do. I'm going to pay back every penny, and I'm going to make sure you never regret helping me." "Austin?" "Yes, ma'am?" I already don't regret it. That was 6 months ago. Austin's trial ended last week. Thanks to an excellent attorney and Austin's complete cooperation, plus his willingness to testify against Rebecca's loan sharks, which led to several arrests. He received 2 years probation and community service instead of prison time. He's working at a local hardware store now, making a fraction of what he used to make, but he's paying back the money bit by bit. More importantly, he's paying rent, buying groceries, and helping around the house without being asked. Rebecca completed her treatment program and moved back to Chicago. She calls Austin once a week, conversations that are stilted and awkward, but slowly getting better. She hasn't called me, and I haven't called her. But here's the thing that nobody saw coming, including me. I'm happy. Really, genuinely happy in a way I haven't been since before James got sick. Austin and I have built something that Rebecca and I never had, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. He tells me about his day, asks my advice, about everything from job applications to whether he should ask out the girl who works at the coffee shop down the street. I teach him to paint. He's terrible at it, just like me. And he fixes everything in my house that's been broken for years. Mrs. Chen has adopted him as another honorary grandchild. The Petersons invite him to their family barbecues. My support group has embraced him completely, and he started volunteering at the animal shelter with me. We're family in the truest sense of the word, not because we share blood, but because we choose each other every day. And Rebecca, I don't hate her anymore. I don't love her either, not the way a mother probably should. But I found something better than either love or hate, indifference. She can't hurt me anymore because I no longer need anything from her. Last weekend, Austin asked me if I thought he should invite his mother for Christmas. That's up to you, I told him. But if you do, make sure it's because you want her here, not because you think you owe her something. What about you? Would you be okay with her being here? I thought about it honestly. Could I sit at my own table with the woman who'd abandoned me for 20 years? Could I watch her try to play happy family with the grandson she'd manipulated into destroying his life? Austin, this is your home now too. If you want your mother here for Christmas, then she's welcome. But she comes as your guest, not as my daughter. Do you understand the difference? He nodded. I think so. But Grandma Patricia? Yes. Even if she comes for Christmas, you're still the family that matters. You're the one who was there when I needed someone most. And that, my friends, is how I learned that sometimes the family you choose is worth more than the family you're born with. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't your forgiveness. It's your boundaries. And sometimes, when you stop chasing the love you think you deserve and start building the life you actually want, you discover that you had everything you needed all along. Rebecca called me yesterday, the first time in 6 months. She wanted to tell me that she's been clean from gambling for 8 months now, that she has a job she likes, that she's thinking about going back to school. That's good to hear, I told her, and I meant it. Mom, she said. And I could hear the hope creeping into her voice again. Maybe we could try again. Maybe we could work on having a relationship. Rebecca, I said gently, I'm glad you're doing well. I'm glad you're getting your life together. But some things, once broken, don't get fixed. They just get replaced with something different. So, that's it? After everything, that's just it. After everything, that's just it. I hung up the phone and went to find Austin, who was in the garage trying to fix my ancient lawnmower. Who was that? He asked, not looking up from the engine. Your mother. He paused in his work. Everything okay? Everything's fine. And it was. It really, truly was. Because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. You can't make people love you the way you want to be loved. But you can choose to love yourself enough to walk away from people who don't know how to love you properly. And sometimes, when you do that, life surprises you with exactly the kind of love you've been looking for all along. And that's my story. 20 years of silence, one phone call, and a choice that changed everything. Not because it brought my daughter back into my life, but because it brought my grandson into it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's just living well and loving the people who actually deserve it. What do you think? Was I too harsh? Should I have given Rebecca another chance? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.